Hi everyone, thank you for joining me and welcome to the channel. My name is Veroosh and we are going to talk about the Aries full moon that we are under at this time. Today we're going to do a collective message and a astrology overview. There's a lot of back-to-back transits that are over us right now, so I am just going to do a collective today, and then we have all signs coming for the upcoming transits. Some of these transits have an overlap with today's full moon, but it's too much information altogether to explain it in one sitting. What have I been hearing from you guys? That some of you are not getting notified of my videos. So since I've been away and I'm coming back, I think it's just good practice to resubscribe to let the notification system know that you're interested in my videos. A few days ago, I posted on the community thread. I've been trying to post on this community thread or post more often. And I posted about the MBTI, which is a personality test. And I asked you guys to ask ChatGPT or any AI of your choice what it thinks your personality profile is. Because I hadn't posted a video during this time, not many people saw the post. So you can go over there or just in the comments here, do that. So basically just ask AI what it thinks your personality profile is, and let us know also what your sun, moon, and rising is in the comments. It was really fun to see that the majority of people who commented were from the same category, which is quite rare. So I'd love to see more about you guys and see what the bigger group says. Okay, so I'm off to do the astrology section. It's going to be super interesting today. This eclipse has a lot to do with the Pisces eclipse in September, as well as a Pisces eclipse last September as well. So we'll explain all that later. Aspects to Jupiter and aspects to Mercury will be in a separate video. Plus, I have a special coming about some extra astrology that we are under that deserves its own video. I'm a little behind, but thanks for your guys' patience. And members, you will have videos coming as well, but some of these big transits I do want to get out to everyone, and we'll make specialized content for you guys. In fact, I think I have an offer for members in terms of a potential special that I'll tell you guys about in the astrology section. So here's our tarot cards, and I'll be back after the astrology section with a personalized reading for you as the collective. And I hope you're having a wonderful Aries full moon, and I'm excited to look at this deeper with you. Hey everyone, welcome to the astrology portion of today's video. We're talking about the full moon in Aries. Now listen, straight up, I am going to make this a members only video if it gets too long. So if you're watching this and you're not a member, it's likely that I got it under the time that I'm trying for. So if that's the case, if it got too long, there may be a second video for members. I'll link it in the description. I'll also let you guys know at the end of recording this section if it's going to go to members. At this point, I don't know. The reason for this is sometimes the astrology is quite complicated, and so therefore it should go to members with the details and such. And if it's comprehensive enough, then I'll post it for everyone. But if it goes for members, then there will be a general summary of these notes for everyone. Throughout the video, I will also tell you about sections that we can do a deep dive about. So feel free to let me know if you're interested in hearing more about a particular part. So we're looking at the full moon in Aries. I've been calling it an eclipse a lot. So if slip of the tongue, I say the eclipse, it's not an eclipse. It's a full moon in Aries at 14 degrees. The reason for that is that there's a lot of interconnection to eclipses, and you'll see this throughout. It's kind of an exciting one, and it actually confirms a second video that I've been making for you guys for a while, and So it's a confirmation, this full moon for me, adds to the patterns that I've been seeing with this other video, with this other astrology. So it just feeds into this other video that you guys are going to get from me soon. The full moon happened on October 6th in the evening Pacific, about 9 p.m. or October 7th if you're east of the Pacific. Some of the main themes that we're going to cover, or topics, is the 17th degree of Pisces, a chiasmus, which is a term that I coined in the spring to talk about the Aries and Pisces energy, the Antiscia and the Contra-Antiscia, and Chiron and planetary cycles, the Chiron planetary cycle, and several other cycles as well. But first, let's just start off with the basics. We're looking at a full moon in Aries ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Scorpio, another sign it rules. So we have double rulership going on here. And although that the angle isn't the best, it's not the easiest, not the hardest, it's just kind of obscure. That connection is there. Plus the sun, which is exalted in Aries, is in Libra. It is debilitated, but the exaltation is increasing the potency of this energy. So we have this Aries full moon in a sign that's ruled by Mars. Mars is in rulership in Scorpio, and the sun is, even though it's debilitated, it's in a sign that the moon is in a sign that the sun rules. And so this gives this extra potent energy. The other thing that's important, and we'll talk about this later, is that we're coming off of a square between Pluto and Mars, but now Mercury on Monday, October 6th, just entered into Scorpio, replicating the same square. And I've been working on a video for you guys about Mercury, and so we'll reserve comments regarding that elsewhere to kind of understand what Mercury's doing. But those are the transits that are impacting this moon directly. Now, I also want to bring up Pallas Athena, that's at 6 degrees of Aquarius now. She's actually creating a square to Mars and a sextile to the moon by sign, but almost a sextile now. Finally, on Wednesday, October 8th, the moon is going to create an opposition to Mars, and this gives us an idea of the context of the astrological environment under which this full moon happened. To me, here there is a sense of urgency. In September and October, we lose the most amount of light, and so in the northern hemisphere, about 100 minutes in the northern latitudes. And so to me, this is symbolic of this full moon, the urgency of what we need to pay attention to and the things that come up. This year in particular, this was heightened by the square between Pluto and Mars, which may have brought up a pushback to the energies of the Pluto-Mars opposition in Leo earlier this year and late last year. So this annual event, which is the Sun-Moon opposition in Aries, is actually amplified by the energies of Mars and Pluto and Pallas Athena. Now, the reason that I incorporate Pallas Athena here is because if Pluto symbolizes power dynamics, and the square with Mars and now Mercury represents some kind of pushback of energy in the Mars-Pluto planetary cycle, the subsequent square between Pallas Athena and Mars may have a tempering effect on some of the things that have been happening. In other words, coming off of the Mars-Pluto square, there is some kind of resolve that arises in our situations. When Mars was opposite Pluto, we gained resolve to stand up for ourselves, and now there has been pushback in this square. But this Pallas Athena sextile the moon by sign, the full moon in Aries, brings some kind of a temperate nature of resolving issues, a groundedness, a fairness to issues. And through this energy, including Mercury, which we will talk about in another video, you may be feeling the need to act with purpose, feel your calling and communicating about the Pluto-Mars square, as well as integrating any shadow energy that has come up. Just to remind you, this cycle between Pluto and Mars is going to continue for 20 years. So whatever you have engaged in with this energy, it's going to be on repeat, and we'll discuss this elsewhere as well. But this is why this full moon has this sense of urgency. You need to learn the things that have emerged for you, and there's this urgency of what you need to do to stand on business, essentially, and to do what you need to do to be authentic within the situation and with yourself. With Mercury here, we get disclosure and clarity of issues. And again, we'll focus on this in context for Mercury in another video. One of the things that emerged as a message is the power of your autonomy within the context of this. The sun, it's almost like the sun is fading because of this decrease in amount of daylight that we experience in early autumn. And it's like this is your time to assert that fading summer energy through this full moon. And this is going to go out after the fact, after the full moon, but this energy is going to be carrying us over throughout the whole week. We'll see this with Chiron in just a minute. So you have power in your autonomy. Things may have come up with the Pluto-Mars square, but the sun is giving its energy towards the moon, and the moon is also receiving energy from Mars through rulership. There is this sense of urgency to act on behalf of yourself. I strongly believe that if something that was of a negative nature came up for you during that square, their power greatly decreases as Pallas Athena forms a square to Mars and soon Mercury. I believe that if people get carried away in their actions and behaviors, it's almost like the square creates a tense environment that perpetuates a shock and awe sort of dynamic. But then when the square to Pallas Athena forms, then we have this kind of energy, almost like being in a nightclub, and when the lights come on, it sort of changes the frequency, breaks up the tension, and whoever is standing on the dance floor looks a little foolish if they continue dancing. In other words, you may have strong feelings throughout this whole week. We'll explore that in the next section, but this is a good time for you to review all the circumstances that you're a part of. Okay, so let's move over to Chiron, which is likely an unexpected feature of this full moon, but it will make sense, especially after the full moon, as Chiron is core to the energies this week. Chiron entered Aries in 2019 and will be in Aries until next year and 2027. So Chiron will begin to enter Taurus next year in 2026 and then retrograde back into Aries after in 2027 entering Taurus for the final time this time. Chiron in Aries coincides with 1968 to 1977. If you were born at that time, it's your Chiron return. So you embody the energy of Chiron more in Aries more than anybody else. And this may have been a particularly important time for you around issues to do with Chiron. Chiron in Aries has to do with identity and self-esteem. And there has been a reckoning of issues to do with identity and what seemed to be like people standing up and asserting themselves in new ways. And I would say in this last year or year and a half, it seems as though this confidence of Chiron and Aries that we've gained has been also pushed back. And this includes the collective. I believe this has to do with the final stretch, the final lesson. And we'll talk about that more in Chiron videos. But if we look to today, October 7th, when I'm filming this for you, we see that the moon will actually create a conjunction with Chiron. The moon passes Chiron on its way into Taurus. And then later this week on Saturday, we are going to see the moon create a square to Chiron. So today I'm just going to go over sextile to Chiron. So I'm just going to go over the transits and then tell you what this means. And then by the time we reach the 12th, which is Sunday, heading into next week, we see the opposition of Sun to Chiron, okay? And this is going to be a significant moment in its planetary cycle. So we have this activation on the 7th of Chiron as the moon passes it, which gives us real resonance for what's going on alongside this full moon in Aries. We have a nice sextile early on in the week, on Saturday, and then the kind of end point of this trajectory, which is the sun opposing Chiron by Sunday. Just to remind you, Chiron recently opposed both Mars, the ruler of this full moon, and Mercury. So here's a chart for October 3rd. And we'll talk about some of the Chiron aspects a little later, but Chiron's been activated, which is our awareness point of some of the boundaries that we exist in, whether boundaries that we have created for ourselves or that have been imposed on us. So even though Chiron is activated just after this full moon, the nature of the environment brings Chiron into the conversation. The lunar aspects, the conjunction and sextile, bring our awareness to what's going on vis-a-vis who we are and how we are perceived. You feel the Mars square Pluto fallout as a consequence of this pushback we experienced last week. And with Chiron, you're processing feelings of criticism, harsh judgment, just really feeling the current environment. But this is an awareness point, so you're becoming aware of everything that is happening. And this is motivating you alongside this full moon to be aware who you are, what kind of circumstances you're in, and elevating through the sun's rays from Libra a decisive moment in which you want to act. In a moment, I'm going to show you how this is a long-term event that will play out well into 2026. But trust me, this is the beginning of an improvement for you. You're being made aware of the things that you need to know about. And it's a response to that Pluto-Mars opposition in which you stood up for yourself, broke free of certain oppressive dynamics. This is just you dealing with the pushback on you already asserting your freedom, your strength, your power. And this is a part of a much larger cycle of healing that we're going to see in a little bit. This is a time in which you should be facing hard truths about yourself or uncomfortable realities. But the discomfort that you are feeling is going to lead you to expansion of who you are. And these uncomfortable situations bring out self-love because you're ready here to stand up for yourself and you are ready here to confront those situations. Because of this sort of dynamic, these strong angles from all the planets, it's a good idea to just give yourself some time and see the outcome of the circumstances that have happened. You are not necessarily going to have to lift a finger to deal with any of this. There are implicit outcomes that will happen, and especially in circumstances where you were wronged or someone plotted or was harmful, you may see that some of these situations resolve themselves in their own way. So let me show you a deeper connection that brings Chiron into this full moon. Currently, Venus and Chiron are not in a strong angle. However, on March 3rd, 2023, Venus and Chiron actually formed a conjunction at 14 degrees of Aries. This is the exact position of the full moon in Aries yesterday. This means that between March 23rd and April 24th, we experienced a whole planetary cycle between Chiron and Aries. This was a cycle of self-love and self-understanding. This is the lessons that you are bringing into October in 2025 and the current situation. In fact, the planetary cycle between Venus and Chiron goes back further. If we go back to May 14th, 2022, we actually see another planetary cycle between Venus and Chiron then. So that means that we've had 2 consecutive Venus-Chiron cycles that began on the 14th degree of Aries, where this full moon is. And so all this time between 2022 and 2024, April sometime, we were under this planetary cycle that brought to us compassion and understanding into the circumstances that we find ourselves in today. So they were preparing us for self-understanding and self-love in whatever kinds of Chiron issues we had going on or we have going on. Do you remember in my last video I mentioned that the Venus-Mars planetary cycle began in Aquarius for 2 consecutive iterations? Do you remember that planetary cycle also began in 2022? This means that between 2022 and 2026, in February, we are also under a Venus-Mars planetary cycle that is addressing social issues, relationships, dynamics between each other, that is connected this time to Aquarius. So the timeline, especially between 2022, 2024, is highlighting Aries areas of your chart as well as Aquarian areas of your chart. This dynamic opens us up to the Venus-Chiron opposition. That's going to happen on November 2nd, 2025, so in a few weeks. And although this planetary cycle is not the Aries 14-degree full moon one, I bet we're going to get some kind of life lesson with regard to self-love, compassion, loving yourself, possibly love that is being taught to us by someone we care about. So the Chiron-Venus planetary cycle highlights key moments of self-love, understanding, and relationships. That is connected to the Mars-Venus planetary cycle that kind of had this double effect in Aquarius for 2 consecutive cycles. We're under that cycle right now. It's finishing in February. Overall, I think that this signals that it's a moment to stand up for yourself, speak your truth, do not things let slide. However, I think it's also important to not be cruel and speak your truth honestly. I think that this cycle, with this understanding from Venus, allows you to recognize dynamics and relationship patterns that bring awareness to improve your situations. And it's preparing you alongside this full moon for some kind of key moment to assert yourself in a situation in early November. So there's another planetary cycle involving Chiron and the position of this full moon, and that is the conjunction of Jupiter and Chiron at 14 degrees of Aries. This begins a 13-year cycle between Chiron and Jupiter until 2036. So Chiron and Jupiter had their conjunction in 2023 at exactly the position of this full moon, which brings our attention straight back to this position. And what's important under this full moon is that Chiron and Jupiter are currently in their opening square, and they have been holding this square with a loose orb since September, and they will continue to hold this aspect well into 2026. This consists of 3 direct squares when they pass each other in a direct square from now until 2026. And this is a part of a larger Chiron transition into Taurus throughout next year and 2027. One thing to note is that in the Chiron-Jupiter planetary cycle, there will not be an iteration in Taurus this time. The next time Chiron and Jupiter meet will be in Gemini at about 16 degrees in 2036. Throughout this cycle that we're in, the 14-degree Aries cycle, Chiron and Jupiter will still form aspects, so we are going to get benefit from aspects to Jupiter, but the cycle itself will not focus on Taurus topics specifically. those Taurus topics have a lot to do with material wealth, and we'll talk about this separately. However, we are going to continue to gain benefit from aspects to Jupiter as it pertains to our identity, self, markers of what we are in life and situations. So expect the benefit of having aspects to Jupiter that began in 2023 continue right until 2036, even though Chiron will be in Taurus. These aspects are very uplifting and healing, just like the Venus aspects. So Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and they provide very loving energy to a very tender area of our chart. This will be opportunities to reconcile limitations, labels that you are left with, everything that's emerged over the last 6 years while Chiron was in Aries. And specifically under this square that we are under right now, expect some positive help, unexpected surprises, elevating situations that push you out of your circumstances. This is very benefic. This is very positive despite it being a square. And of course, we're going to dedicate a whole video to this. But for the purpose of this full moon, I want you guys to remember that this planetary cycle between Jupiter and Chiron began at the same position to the degree as this full moon is. So the reason this video is late is because I lost track of my notes. And so this section is the section that completely messed me up. I have it figured out now, but if I misspeak or something, there was a lot of confusion. I wrote down 17 degrees of Pisces and then forgot where I got it from. And I was looking all over the place. I didn't write it down fully, and I just wrote down 17 degrees of Pisces. And I thought I confused myself, but now I know what's going on. So under this full moon, the North Node is within several minutes away from 17 degrees of Pisces. So this is the position of the eclipse on September 7th, 2025. I forgot this connection, but the 17th degree or 16th, 15th degree, 16th, 17th, 18th degree is super important for the astrology. So I forgot to mention this during the last eclipse on September 7th, 2025, but 17th degree of Pisces is incredibly important. Just remember, this is where the North Node is for the full moon in Aries, but it connects us to September 30th, 7 BCE. This was the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter at 17 degrees of Pisces. We've talked about this a lot, specifically under the March 25th, 2024 Libra eclipse video, and I will link that in the comments. The Saturn-Jupiter Great Conjunction happened on September 30th, 7 BCE, and this is called the true star of Bethlehem. And in Christian teachings, it is linked to the birth of Jesus. So people suggest that the Star of Bethlehem was actually the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, a planetary cycle that resets every 20 years. We had this conjunction in 2020 in Aquarius, but in 7 BCE, this happened at 17 degrees of Pisces. This is exactly where the North Node is alongside this full moon in Aries. So March 25th, 2024 is very important to this moment because this is when we had a full moon eclipse in Libra at 5 degrees. Under this eclipse, I figured out that when the sun is at 5 degrees of Libra, it's September 30th. September 30th is the annual moment at which the sun is at 5 degrees. This coincides with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, the true star of Bethlehem. So the North Node under this full moon is pointing to the exact same position that is historically linked to the Holy Roman Empire, Jesus, and Christianity. Not to get into this too much, you can watch the video for March 25th, 2024 later. But the eclipses alongside the Aries-Libra axis, the ones that we've just finished, are deeply connected to the Holy Roman Empire, Jesus, and Christianity. And so because our full moon today at 14 degrees Aries is not necessarily an eclipse, well, it's not at all. Through the connection of the North Node, it's pointing back to that eclipse in 2024, as well as a connection to the true star of Bethlehem, the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. So next, I want to talk about the Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia. If you want a more detailed breakdown of this concept, please let me know in the comments. We can do a members only, and if I have enough interest from a general audience, I would like to do it for everyone. This is a new concept for many people, so let me just give you some idea of what we're talking about. Antiscia describes the quality of light in any point of the zodiac, okay? So when 2 points mirror each other across the solstices, they are said to experience the same amount of daylight and the same direction of that daylight increasing or decreasing. So signs that are typically not connected become connected by experiencing the same amount of light. So Libra and Pisces, Virgo, and Aries for the purpose of our full moon. However, there's another concept called Contra-Antiscia, and this describes an inversion of light, meaning how much daylight is in relation to how much night there is. These are measured across the equinox points, and these are said to have an inverse relationship of light and dark, as opposed to similar, it's inverse. In early ancient astrology, astronomers used to compare this by sign. So Aries to Capricorn, Scorpio to Aquarius, and so on. But by the 1st century BCE, they actually focus specifically on signs, and that has been canonized since then, not by signs, but by degrees. So since the 1st century BCE, what we're looking at to find an Antiscia is the exact same day, which makes sense because the amount of daylight that we get at the beginning of Libra season is very different than the amount of daylight we get at the end. Like I said, I think the metric is about 100 minutes lost in September alone of daylight. So what's special about this full moon is the Antiscia, but it's also the Contra-Antiscia, the combination of both. So the sun and the North Node form an Antiscia across the solstice. The moon and the South Node form an Antiscia across this solstice. But then at the same time, the North Node and the moon form an Antiscia across the equinox, and the sun and the South Node form a Contra-Antiscia across the equinox. I don't know if I said this correctly. The North Node and the moon form a Contra-Antiscia across the equinox. So what's special about this full moon is that there is 2 things happening at the same time. That's extremely rare. It happens maybe once a decade, a couple times a decade. So this is the stuff we're going to have to skim over. And if you want like a detailed conversation about what each pair represents, we can do that. We can do a little workshop on Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia. But for the purpose of our full moon, in terms of what it means, this has a lot to do with your alignment to be ready and effective in your work. It's a time to get in tune with your ancestors, deep connections to the past, including past lives, if you believe in those things. And you will very clearly see how your behaviors are connected to outcomes. Some of the harder consequences of the Contra-Antiscia may be that you may find that you get distracted, specifically through social connections, and distracted away from the things that you need to do. So pay attention to being distracted from interacting. You want to go spend time with people and you forget to do your chores or whatever you set out to do. But through this dynamic, this very special double aspect, you're going to feel a deep connection between yourself and others. This, to me, really resonates with aspects between Chiron and Jupiter and Venus and the moon. So there's a deep sense of compassion, growing, and understanding. So we were talking about the 17 degrees of Pisces being super connected to some themes, such as the Roman Empire, Christianity, and Jesus. I want you to keep that in mind when we talk about this connection. The last time there was a Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia combination was September 18th, 2024. And if you've watched my channel, you know I've gone over this again and again, but here we connected again. The eclipses on September 18th, 2024, March 15th, 2025, and September 23rd, 2025 were all connected because they were happening alongside the same axis of Virgo and Pisces. So this full moon that we are under right now is the first lunation since there was an Antiscia and Contra-Antiscia in another full moon and new moon with a 1 degree orb. They usually show up in orbs of 2 or 3 degrees. It's very rare to see them in such a tight orb, such as under this full moon, but also the eclipse on September 18th, 2024. And I want you to remember specifically March 15th, 2025. I'll explain that in the next section. But that's one of the 3 eclipses that are connected via the Pisces-Virgo axis at the last degrees of those signs. Okay, so this is a chart for March 15th, 2025. So I took the moon back to March 14th, 2025 for the eclipse that we saw then. And here we're going to talk about not the eclipse itself, but another feature that we talked about in the spring called the chiasmus. This is a term that I adopted from literary theory. It's a description of an interlocking energy pattern between, in this case, Pisces and Aries. So to understand what a chiasmus is, a lot of talk has been around about the Aries Libra eclipse series overlapping into the Pisces Virgo eclipse series. So hopefully this will kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. The fact that energies are interlocking, overlapping, and interacting with each other from 2 different sets. What's more important for this to be a chiasmus is that the Aries-Libra connection is much more forward thinking, and it has to do with the future. And we talked about this in the springtime. Again, I'll link the appropriate video for March 15th, 2025 in the comments. And in March, we talked about how this chiasmus, the energy of the Virgo-Pisces eclipses that we're experiencing now, has a lot to do with consolidation of energy from the last several years. We went into detail about that then, so please check it out. But under this March 15th, 2025 eclipse, both Mercury and Venus turned retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries. And so they formed a chiasmus because they moved in retrograde motion between Aries at 9 degrees to about 27, 26 degrees of Pisces. And so that mirrored the eclipse pattern in an inverse way. And again, connecting the inversion of the energy. The Aries-Libra energy having to do with the future, and the Pisces-Virgo energy having to do with the past. Not only Venus and Mercury went through this retrograde pattern, where they moved between Aries and Pisces, because both Neptune and Saturn are going through these retrogrades right now, in which they moved into Aries and now have gone back into Pisces. So there's this whole echo across the signs happening in 2025. So I just forgot, I'm going to interject. These kinds of videos, I think I'm going to keep it for everyone. These kinds of videos take a lot of time, and because of the complicated nature of them, people sometimes, not as many people are engaged. And so if you could kindly like and comment if this is making sense to you, then please do so. I'd appreciate it. I've put a lot of work and effort into this. So specifically, Mercury and Venus moved between the 9th degree of Aries to 26th, 24th degree of Pisces, creating this chiasmus. On March 29th, 2025, we had another eclipse at 9 degrees of Aries. This eclipse coincided with the beginning point of both retrogrades. And when we look back in history, and I'll link the video in the description in the comments, this eclipse was directly connected with Venus retrograde and eclipses that coincided with the birth of the Roman Empire and Christianity, because Christianity was institutionalized by the Romans. So the Christianity we know today is a byproduct of Roman construction. And this, of course, echoes Saturn ingress into Pisces in 2023, in which issues to do with religion have become incredibly focal. And over this last 2.5 years, we have a new pope. A lot has changed in many religions, but specifically in Christianity. And these endpoints of these retrogrades actually connect us to the degrees of 27 Virgo and Pisces, which connects us to September 17th, 2024, which is the last Antiscia Contra-Antiscia point. Not just one, both of them together. That's the rare part. As well as our connection to the 17th degree of Pisces. This is where Jupiter and Saturn joined in 7 BCE, a position many people speculate is the birth of Jesus Christ as the true star of Bethlehem, and also coinciding with our full moon. So this is the stuff I love about astrology. The synchronicity is intense. I was excited in the springtime, but now it's just unhinged. These kinds of videos are going to go to members, but because of the uniqueness, this is going to go out to everyone. I'm just in awe by the synchronicity of these astrologies. Before we go, I want to give you guys a few dates to look forward to or maybe reflect on. So on May 25th, 2025, earlier this year, Venus and Mars, remember they're in their Aquarius 2022 to 2026 planetary cycle double, they created a trine between 18 degrees, or it was actually 17 degrees of Aries to 17 degrees of Leo, right? Remember when Mars was in Leo for a super long time? So this has a lot to do with relationships and also awareness of the self in relationships. Maybe things to do with self-confidence issues that you're facing right now. Maybe learning opportunities from people you love. But look back to May 2025 for more self-awareness with regard to through other people, through your friendships and romance and love. I have a couple dates moving forward. So on April 24th, 2026, we're going to get a lot of wonderful transits that we talked about in recent videos. But we're also going to experience a trine between Lilith in Sagittarius and Mercury at 14 degrees of Aries. So since Mercury is so important in terms of stirring of the pot, we may consider that maybe some events in late April 2026 may be reflecting the current energies, in particularly vis-a-vis treachery or some kind of ill intent. Then on April 28th, a couple days after, Mars will form a trine to Lilith at 14 degrees Sagittarius. Mars is going to be at 14 degrees of Aries. So if you're in currently some kind of conflict, hopefully you are getting the wherewithal and support that you need to shoulder it. But if you're doing some long-term planning, you may want to prepare for the end of April 2026. And with these aspects between Mercury and Mars, remember Mars is the ruler of this full moon, there may be some deceptive behavior that you can prepare for now. Now, Jupiter is going to do amazing things for us early next year. Here is a chart for March 18th, 2026, and we have a new moon in Pisces. I think it's an eclipse. It's pretty close. Yeah, or maybe not. It's a close call. But Jupiter will be at its exalted degree at 15 degrees of Cancer at that time. And it's going to actually square Venus at 14 degrees of Aries. That's where the full moon is now. Something I didn't mention in today's video is that Jupiter and Venus are actually in a sextile right now. So that square in March 2026 is going to be a progression of this energy. I think it's going to be the closing square by then. And so this adds to the emotional nature relationship aspect of what we're experiencing. But in March and April 2026, we are going to experience real improvement or uplift, improvement of circumstances. Jupiter is going to trine this area, 17 degrees of Pisces, where the eclipse was on September 7th, as well as where the true star of Bethlehem was on September 30th, 7 BCE. And although this is a square, there may be a bit of a conflict of interest here. This provides us with another data point for our timeline as being activated. We'll explore this in future videos. Now, I want to show you a couple other things. In this case, we're going to look at eclipses. This is going to be very quick. So other eclipses that may spark your memory is a eclipse by degree on April 5th, 2019 at 15 degrees of Aries. Sorry, this is a new moon. I knew. But this moon actually squared the nodes. It was at an extreme. So something on April 2019 may be resonating for you now, a similar energy. And then if you want to look a little bit more recently, there was also a full moon in Aries at about 16 degrees on October 9th, 2022. And that was actually conjunct Chiron. So maybe some of the similar issues that we're dealing with now crept up for you around that time. And on October 8th, 2014, it's a while now, but I do see 2014 coming up a lot right now. There was a very similar eclipse at 15 degrees of Aries. So again, going back to the same topics. 2014 was very important, especially for millennials. A lot of millennials reminisce to those years. So there may be something important connected to October 2014 for you. Now, eclipses happen in pairs across each axis. So in this case, Aries and Libra. And on October 7th, 2029, which is in the future, we get a new moon. This is an eclipse in Libra right across from this position. So we have another date and another data point for our timeline. So in terms of outcomes, completion points, everything sort of coming through to a new beginning, you may see a new beginning around October 7th, 2029 that's connected to the events you're experiencing now. So I just wanted show you one more thing, and this has to do with our star of Bethlehem point. Jupiter and Saturn formed a conjunction at 14 degrees of Aries in 967 CE. So Jupiter and Saturn form these once every 20 years, as we know, but in 967, they actually came together at the 14th degree of Aries. That is significant, again, to our themes of Roman Empire and so forth, because Otto I was crowned as the king of the Holy Roman Empire, and that led to the centralization of power in Europe. So this was the direct moment. Beyond this, the Fatimid Caliphate completed their conquest of Egypt, and that consolidated their power in northern Africa. Beyond this, there were major wars in Eastern Europe when Rus invaded Bulgaria and set that history also into a crystallization point that we are still seeing the outcomes of today. So if we look at this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 967 CE, at that point, all those events that I mentioned were very important to the modernization of the Roman Empire and the consolidation of power within Europe. And that's something that we are seeing again and again in 2025, emerging alongside these eclipses and now this full moon. Okay, so I know this was really long, but the nerds will appreciate. I'm a nerd. I appreciate this. And I would like to share this with everyone because I think it's a very special moment in history. So I would like to document it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I'm going to switch over to tarot for you guys now. And we have a lot of astrology to talk about. There's another astrological nuance to this, but I'll save that for the next video. Hello, everyone. Welcome back after the astrology. I know that you guys probably saw this card when I was shuffling earlier, so you had the Nine of Pentacles there. So I'm going to include that in our reading. It's Venus in Virgo, and although Venus is leaving Virgo at the end of the week, she's still in Virgo now, so that's the zodiac that rules this card specifically. I hope that the astrology was as exciting as I anticipate it to be. I'm filming as the sun is setting before I do the astrology. I already know what some of the things that I'll be talking about are, but I do know it's very exciting astrology. But let's take a look at the tarot and see what kind of messages we have for you. Like I said, we have the Nine of Pentacles here, and then we start off strong with the Chariot card, which is the sign of Cancer. Looking back at our reading, Jupiter is there in Cancer, and later on this week, Jupiter is going to be forming some pretty special aspects, specifically with the sun, but we'll save that for another day. So we have the Cancer card, we have the Five of Wands, the Seven of Swords, the Devil, the the Prince of Cups, the Lust card, which is Leo energy. Leo's very important for us at this time. We have the Eight of Swords. We have the Ten of Pentacles, which is Mercury in Virgo. Mercury has now entered Scorpio and is a sextile to this position. And then we have the Star card, which is the Star of Aquarius or the sign of Aquarius. So that's the cards we have on the table. Well, there's definitely a theme of overcoming because we both have the Chariot and the Knight of Cups. And so maybe something you have come to terms with and have overcome, and now you are opening up again towards someone or towards something. There's peace in your heart, even though in the past there has been some kind of strife, some kinds of barriers in your way, maybe some degree of worry or disagreement with other people who are around you. In fact, I do think that you're coming at this through a somewhat difficult environment. We did have the square between Mars and Pluto just a few days ago, so this could be carryover from those transits. Although we don't have a strong Mars or Pluto card, despite this Devil, which is Capricorn, where Mars is exalted, there's a situation that's carried over. This card is Jupiter in Gemini, and Jupiter was in Gemini just last year. There could be outstanding issues that have carried over from the past into this year for you. This is like bad blood, bad vibes with people that sort of followed you into these current circumstances. And because we just had a series of eclipses in Aries and Libra, where the full moon is right now, this could be signifying that there's a closure, or at least you are reaching a place where you've come to terms with what has happened, and you're navigating alongside but sort of separating from those things in the past. Like I said in the astrology, this is a strong mix of energy, which means that the Aries energy interlocks with Pisces energy in a very significant way. And so this Aries energy, which is linked to things like the Roman Empire, structural things around us, are not bringing to us what we need. This is also quite a strong energy for Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces. And again, this is echoing the eclipses in Pisces and Virgo in the last degrees, alongside the Venus-Saturn conjunction earlier this year in Pisces at her exalted degree. This is where she passed the North Node and exited from the underworld after her cazimi with the Sun. This happened in March and February. I think I'll be linking the video down below. All that means is that the energy of Venus is interacting with Saturn in a profound way. And this reminds us to let go of certain structures that are no longer doing us well. This could manifest through a person or a situation that you're involved in, situations that try to hold you down or hold you back from being you and pursuing your goals and your hopes. In fact, a lot in this reading has to do with ambition for money, making money, finding your way through. And there may have been considerable obstacles along the way to your prosperity. And some of this had to do with that Saturnian, Piscean energy of the old system that was trying to hold you back. Institutions, governments, I don't want to get political, but whatever kinds of naysaying that you have around you, you're overcoming with this energy. Now, as I said, we're going to do other videos on this, but there is a profound square between Jupiter and Chiron moving forward. This gives us a fair bit of work to do, and so expect some of the things that you have to work through, especially limiting factors, to carry forward. But through this time, you will find your antidotes to the things that are standing in your way. Again, rules, things that are trying to slow you down, things that are not on the same page, right? When we're not on the same page as something else, that can be a limiting factor. This is all about overcoming those limiting factors through this full moon. And remember, the moon reaches Chiron just after the full moon by October 7th, by the time you're watching this. And so many of you are going to be in touch with the emotions of those circumstances that you felt have held you back. And this may be coming at you from different positions. There's a little bit to do with your own mind about the issue, your own thoughts, such as limiting beliefs, overcoming them. And then also maybe a little bit of a push-pull with allies, which means that people who are supposed to be on your side, there may be a little bit of struggle, like you can't get them to do the things that you need them to do to get to where you want to go so easily. But this is more of a pattern or repeat event. Chiron and Saturn are now in a semi-square, or they're approaching a semi-square. So this could be a time in which we're really facing the kinds of things that get in our way in order to understand how they work, why they don't work for us, and having the wherewithal to overcome it. Okay, so I know that was kind of tough. It was like my tough love conversation. I want to remind you that this is the energy that we're transmuting moving forward. So this is what we're breaking down, changing, so that we can break out and do the things that we want to do. And at the center is your heart opening with the Prince of Cups. Now, this could be an external person, a mirror. This could be that Mars-Pluto square, the challenger to your system, somebody challenging you to love and to be more open. But it could also be you getting ready to open up, to feel those feelings, and to really root yourself in your ambitions and your goals, the things that you feel you've been held back from. A lot of here, there's passion. There is a desire to go in a particular path, to follow your dreams and ambitions. And we have the star, which is very lucky. It's assuring the positive outcome of these tough situations. So overall, this looks like maybe not enemies, but definitely have been going through it over the last little while. But there's a concrete goal that you're approaching and you're achieving. And this is the wish fulfillment, the large moment of affirmation. Material gain, achieving your goals, despite any kinds of limitations, moving towards the possibilities that you have for yourself or the hopes that you have for yourself. You can look back to Leo season or maybe even Aquarius season for visions of what that may have been, or even a reminder to the Pluto in Capricorn and now Mars in Leo, which was the opposition just a few months ago. Mars was in Leo for a very long time, formed lots of aspects for several months. And through that time, while Mars was in Leo, you may have come to realize what matters to you, what you really want. There's a lot of support here from family. There's a lot of family interdependence and good luck, because the star always represents lots of good luck on your journey. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to cap it at now because we have lots to cover, so there will be more messages soon. But I hope you guys are doing great, and I hope you've had a nice full moon, and I will talk with you later. Take care. Bye.